Let's talk about why each of my startups failed. A few weeks ago, I made a video talking about the tech stack that I used for each of those startups, but in this one, I want to talk about the things that I learned and why each of them didn't really pan out for me. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video because at the end, I'm going to give some advice that I think would be really helpful to anyone looking to make a startup themselves or start a company themselves. There were three startups. There was Mogulvate, and there was How You Doing, and then there were Student Cribs. And I want to talk about why each one of them failed. Mogulvate was supposed to be like LinkedIn, but for entrepreneurs and founders. Actually, that's kind of the way that I describe it because that's like the thing that most people know of is LinkedIn, and you understand what LinkedIn is and how to think about LinkedIn. But really, there was this other website called Forest at the time, or maybe even years before, which was like a private, very actual, you had to be invited. It was a private social network just for web designers or UX designers and web developers. And mobile development wasn't really a thing back then, but it was really just for web design and or graphic and UX design and for web development. And you had to be invited to be a part of this thing, this network. And so what that meant is that everyone was pretty high quality. Like there were really smart people there, and you kind of knew that the people that you were going to be, talking to were very intelligent, had a lot of experience, and knew what they were doing. And I wanted it to be like that, but for entrepreneurs and startup founders. I think the first problem that I ran into, and I didn't really realize this until later on, the first problem that I ran into was that I didn't understand the mindset of a founder or an entrepreneur versus a UX designer or a web developer. Now, in the case of the latter, web designers and web developers, there's a community and there's a culture of sharing the things that you do. And it's not to say that that doesn't exist when it comes to entrepreneurs or founders, but it just exists in a very different way. And I didn't really understand that. And I was trying to build basically as close to the exact same thing as I could of what Forest was, but just directing it at a different group of people. Another reason that Mogulvate didn't work, that it failed, is because frankly, and this is like, took me a long time to kind of realize and admit, like, I was not the right person for the job, I don't think. I was in college. Like I was a freshman in college when I started working on this, and I didn't have. First off, the app, like the product, was going to be built on network effects, and I didn't understand network effects whatsoever. Let's say that I did understand network effects. I was a freshman in college, so I was like 18, turning 19 years old. I don't remember what part of the year I did it in, but I didn't have a network or access to a network or even a real understanding of where to go to reach those people at that time. The next one was called How You Doing? And How You Doing was supposed to be two things at once. It was supposed to be I guess the simplest way to put it would be a blog, but we were going to kind of dress it up and make it a bit fancier, more of like a modern online, e-magazine, if you will. And it was supposed to cover everything that was going on in our college, in the town around our college, and then more broadly in the city in which our college existed. And we kind of wanted to help people, expand and have new experiences and stay connected with what was going on. And that was the first part. The second part was we wanted this to be a student to student marketplace. There were a number of problems with this. The first is that we didn't do any market research. So we kind of just assumed that people would use this. Actually, frankly, I didn't do any market research for the first thing, Mogulvate. Definitely didn't do it for this. This was like a problem that we kind of lived. So we were basing this off of lived experience, but only the lived experience of ourselves, not of others. And we did get some traction, like we got some interest in this. But it kind of brings me to my second problem is that because I didn't know how to code at the time and neither did my co-founder. So everything was built in WordPress and I was in charge of all of that stuff. And WordPress, you could do stuff, but to a point. Like there were situations that we kind of thought up of like, well, what do we do in this case, in that case? And they were like kind of big problems that we didn't have an answer for. And because we were using WordPress, it was because we were using WordPress and I didn't know how to code, we couldn't go and like fix that problem because we were dependent on existing plugins to be out there that we could install and use, or on being able to go and buy a plugin or have the theme that we were using in WordPress do something for us. And so we were very, very dependent on WordPress and the ecosystem that exists around it. And we were not able to really do anything custom, which frankly is what we needed at that time. The fact that we were trying to do two different things at once was also really not good. And eventually we actually did end up just kind of honing in and focusing on one of them. We focused on like the blog magazine part. And it turns out, I think that that was not differentiated enough within the market. I think in hindsight, we should have chosen the store part and tried to really do more user research and really pin down like what we were actually going to be able to do to bring value. We didn't focus on bringing value enough or differentiating ourselves enough, and we should have focused in a lot more. I had a co-founder for this one, and he was one of my best friends, and I love him. He was a great guy, but I think in terms of being co-founders together, that wasn't really a great fit. And I think it's really important the fit between you and your co-founder, because it's like people describe having a co-founder and having a startup as like a marriage, and the startup is like your baby together. And I think, we were great. We were great as friends, but just not as co-founders. My third startup, which was the last one that I had while I was in college, it was called Student Cribs. And it was basically, you can think of it as like apartments.com, but for college students. I built this with WordPress, and it actually worked really, really well. Like, of all of them, this is probably the one that I'm most proud of, because I think it kind of got the furthest in terms of like success. This one was really, really good, and the website actually worked really, really well. Even though it worked really well, it was still WordPress. And so there were things, and I don't remember examples because this is going back like 7 years, but there were things that I wanted to do that unfortunately I just couldn't do because it was, I was totally dependent on WordPress and the ecosystem that surrounds it versus being able to learn something, completely on my own and being able to implement it completely on my own. And actually, interestingly enough, Student Cribs, this startup, was the reason that I started learning how to code. I guess story for another time. The issue with this was more so the frequency that someone would actually need to use the website. So if you have a year lease, you don't need to go and look for another lease until maybe 1, 2, or maybe 3 months before your lease is going to go up. So really just at most, you only need to actually use this website that I was creating once a year. But since most people at universities will stay in the same apartment for multiple years that they're there, not maybe if not all of them even, it became a situation where like once I would help somebody, once someone would get the value that I wanted them to get from using this website, they maybe never had to use it again, and at most would have to only use it again once a year. I think the lessons that I guess I would kind of draw from this and I would like to leave behind are don't cut corners, I guess is the way to put it. Like there are certain corners, like for example, customer research and talking to customers, that you shouldn't cut. And that kind of brings me to my second one, which is be customer obsessed. Your job is to deliver value to your customers and understand your customers and kind of nothing else. So be customer obsessed. Always be trying to learn more about your customers. It's really easy to build something cool. You can learn how to code and go build something cool and put it on the App Store. It's really hard though to build something cool that people want, or even better, that people need. 2 more pieces of advice that I want to give. Number 1, start small. Like, I don't mean small in terms of the problem that you're trying to solve. It can be a really big problem. But start small in the sense that you're focusing on a very narrow and specific thing, and deliver value really, really well in that thing. You can't be everything to everyone, but you can be something to someone. And so be that something. Be the best version of that something that anyone has ever seen. The other thing is, going along with the corners and don't cut in corners, don't skip the market research, because that's extremely important. And Google is not everything. Like, don't go on Google and say, oh, okay, it's there, I see it on Google, and then that's it, because I would do that. Go and actually talk to people. Go to where the people who you think are going to be your target customers are and talk to them. Ask them questions. Hope you guys all liked the video. If you enjoyed, definitely like, comment, and subscribe. Put the little notification thing on as well, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Peace.